Hey everyone, we have another technical difficulty at the beginning of this video, but it's a little bit better than last week, so please hang in there with us. Just know that we are working on getting better equipment so that this stuff doesn't happen anymore. If this video is a blessing to you, please like it, please subscribe to our channel, and if this particular video is a blessing to you, I just ask that you share it, maybe that it might be a blessing to somebody else. Thank you and enjoy the video on Daniel chapter 4.
Good morning. It's good to see all of you. Does the Bible have an agenda? Okay, that's good. Okay. Took you a second there, right? You had to think about this for a second because our culture actually views an agenda as a negative thing. But if you're upfront with a lot of times that's when it's hidden, right? We don't like hidden agendas and something trying to manipulate us into doing something. But the Bible, from the very get-go, has an agenda. Pretend to be something that it's not. It is a book that is pointing us towards God, which the Bible describes that's simultaneously pointing us away from things that are against God. That's how it starts, and that's actually how it finishes as well. Look, there's something called a paradigm shift, okay, that takes place, and that's actually kind of what the Bible is trying to get us to do. We're born into this world, we're born into a culture and something that we can't control, and many times we have a viewpoint that doesn't match up with that, with what the Bible is talking about. And what it's trying to do is to get us to have a paradigm shift. A paradigm is like changing well, it could be like the changing of a lens, okay? In order to see something more clearly or to see reality in a different perspective. But many times it's moving from our current position on a given topic or a given subject in order to look at something from another angle as well. If you think about it, if you're looking at an object and you're looking at it from this side and you keep the object stationary and you look at it from this side, I not only have a different perspective on the object, yes? Okay, so there is a notch or a hole in the fence to my neighbor's house to our left. Actually, Don's neighbor, but our neighbor right now. Okay, so there's a hole in the fence. I'm not sending any signals. We don't need to fix it. That's not the purpose. But when I look through it at specific times of year, say 3 weeks ago or a month ago, and if I look directly into it, the only thing I could see is a huge squash plant. And that's all I could see. In fact, the squash had made its way through our fence, and I got a squash out of it, which we did not eat. A gift from the neighbor. But if I'm looking through that, and all I can see is this one squash plant, I have a certain perspective, right? And then I tilt my head just to the left a little bit, and I can see the back of the fence back there. All of a sudden, I start seeing tomato plants. I start seeing other garden things. I see a sprinkler, and sometimes there's a dog that's running back there. I'm saying this as if I've done this, like look through my neighbor's hole in the fence. Okay, but if I were to change perspectives over to the right then, okay, and look through the hole, I would actually see the neighbor's house. I would see a barbecue, their porch, and my angry neighbor looking at me. This is what I mean by a paradigm shift. We're still looking at or through the same thing, but we actually rotate ourselves to a different position and try to see from someone else's perspective or even from God's perspective until we have actually a different interpretation of something. When we talk about a paradigm shift, the reason it's so difficult for so many people is because sometimes when we're looking through that hole or we're looking through that lens, we've made it foundational. Okay? We've made whatever we're looking through, we've said this is the truth and this is everything that I know. And sometimes it's hard to give that up and to say that there's more to the picture, or maybe there's less, or something I'm not seeing clearly. We're going to read a story about that today. A story of great humility. And when we have a paradigm shift, we don't tend to like this, especially in American culture, because it often looks like we aren't sticking to our guns. We aren't sticking to what we've always known what the truth is. But that's the idea of a paradigm shift, is that new knowledge has come in, and so you actually change your mind on something, and that's actually okay. That's a good thing. That's what humility is actually about. As Jonah pointed out last week, I know some of you, probably none of you saw this, the book of Daniel isn't actually about Daniel. He's not the main character in this book. It's actually, the story is about King Nebuchadnezzar, an evil tyrant called Nebuchadnezzar the Destroyer, and his interaction with God, and Daniel is a key contributor in this. He's the main protagonist, but he's not actually the main part of the story. In chapter 1, Nebuchadnezzar the Destroyer steals the victims after taking over their city and then promotes them into his office after he sees that they are well-rounded people and they know what they're doing better, and they're put under tests for that. Chapter 2, King Nebuchadnezzar has a dream about all these kingdoms, this huge statue, right? And all these medals representing different kingdoms, and it is to be destroyed. And his kingdom is one of those. And then in chapter 3, at the very end of it, after he makes this golden statue and forces people to worship it, he throws the three friends who are against worshiping this statue, he throws them into a fiery furnace it was 7 times hotter than it normally is, that would normally just incinerate people. And he sees that there's a fourth man then walking in there. He says, it looks like one of the gods. And while being convicted in the moment, he says something. He says, there is no God that can save like this one. He recognizes the power of God, of Yahweh, and of Jesus there in the fiery furnace. While he understands that there's a God and he understands something about this God, that no God can save like this, he actually does not know him at all. And it's depicted by the end of chapter 3. The end of chapter 3 ends with him saying, I will tear from limb anybody who speaks evil against this God. Well, if he would have said that before, he would have just condemned himself, right? And I don't think God would ever say something that egregious, that extreme. But he doesn't actually understand who this God is. Okay, and this is where we get the 4th chapter. It's not actually written from Daniel's perspective about King Nebuchadnezzar. This is finally Nebuchadnezzar's conversion story, and it's from his own perspective. And he has another dream, and in this one, it's similar to the first one, where there's a great object that's destroyed. There's a giant tree, and it spans huge up into the sky, and it says that there's fruit and shelter for all the living flesh, it says. And all the living flesh lived under it. And then this messenger comes down, and he says, cut this tree down, cut it down, and leave a stump and the roots. And then it goes on to tell of a prophecy that would later be fulfilled. It says, let his mind be changed to that of a beast for 7 times, which means 7 years. And while he has this dream, he goes to all of his interpreters, and none of them can actually explain it. And so finally he comes back to Daniel, who explained his first dream, who's in charge of all the interpreters. And he says, okay, explain to me, Belteshazzar, explain to me what my own dream means. In the beginning of verse 19, it says that Daniel was overwhelmed, frightened, or appalled. That's what that word means. Have you ever been called to your boss's office and you know it ain't going to go well? You know this is bad. You know that feeling in the pit of your stomach? That describes the word that Daniel feels, okay? Let's think about this for a second. Now just imagine with me a boss that you would have that, some of you don't have to imagine this, by the way, that loves power and loves to know that they are in power, okay? Now you have to give your boss some information that's not your fault, but you have to divulge something to him or her that you know is probably going to get you fired. Okay? And you know that they're not a very gracious boss. But probably not just you either, but many of your coworkers. And you're sitting there in the office, and you know you should tell the truth, but you're thinking also about the consequences, but if you tell the truth, you know what's going to happen. We think of Daniel as a courageous young man, which he is. But I think he's also human, and he realizes in part of this stuff, he's kind of acknowledging and fearful about what's about to happen. Oh yeah, and by firing, I mean he's going to kill you. And then Daniel said, that's you. The big tree, it's you. And I'm going to dance on your grave because God is far more powerful than you. That's how it goes, right? Okay, no, that's not at all what he says, right? That was my interpretation. That's what I like to say about my enemies when I'm thinking kind of selfishly and I'm thinking like, well, this should end and they need to bow down to God. No, it doesn't say that at all. Daniel calls him king, and this term is an earthly king. He calls him ruler over basically the known world. He acknowledges it, and he says, my king. He says, the bottom of verse 19, he says this, I wish the events foreshadowed in this dream would happen to your enemies, my Lord, and not you. That's a pretty astonishing statement from someone whose country just got destroyed by this guy, basically. He's been taken captive and enslaved in this pagan culture. That's a pretty strong statement. He says, yeah, the tree is going to be cut down. You will eat grass like a cow in the wilderness, and you will be driven from your society. In verse 25, the second half, he says, until you learn that the Most High rules over the kingdoms of the world and gives to them anyone he chooses. Verse 27, King Nebuchadnezzar, please accept my advice. Stop sinning and do what is right. Break from your wicked past and be merciful to the poor, and perhaps then you will continue to prosper. That prophecy is given to him. He says this is going to happen. And immediately it all happens. But after a year. Which tells me something. I think I should give us hope in our current situation that's been going on for some time now. That God's timing isn't our timing. Right? Even though the prophecy was stated, it actually takes quite a bit of time to be fulfilled. And I'm sure Daniel is sitting there waiting, and I'm sure Jerusalem is sitting there waiting for this to happen, and they have to wait for a year. And it says a year passes, and while that year passes, there goes Nebuchadnezzar out onto one of his rooftops, and he looks over his entire city, boastfully saying, look at all I've done. And while that happens, the same prophecy is repeated to him from a voice. And then, everything that dream says happens to the king. You know, pride is such a peculiar state of being, isn't it? Being proud. Thinking that we are something that maybe that we aren't. Pride is a certain paradigm that blinds you to reality. Not just about yourself, which it does, but it blinds you also to others. About the world in general. Makes you think that you're above others, as King Nebuchadnezzar we're seeing with him right here. When I was in second or third grade, and Mom, you can comment on this and remind me when it was. When I was in second or third grade, I remember sitting in my classroom of 8. We were in a church school, and we sat there, and I remember I sat kind of in the middle and on the right side, and I remember I had a hard time seeing the board. And so my teacher moved me to the front of the class. And so I said, okay, that's fine. I could see the board a little better. And as that progressed, I remember soon I couldn't see the board again. And in fact, I would have to squint. And he said the dreaded words that I never wanted to hear. This is before big glasses were cool, by the way. But I blamed it on him. I said, no, it's your writing. I can't, it's not my fault. It's you. You need to write clear because I can't see your writing. And I heard a kid in the back. I distinctly remember this because I was so horrified what was coming down the pike for me. There's a kid in the back. He's like, I can read it just fine. He says, what does the board said? I squinted. I made something up. I don't remember what I said. Within a few days, I was there with my mom at the glasses store because I didn't know what the ophthalmologist was. I just knew that you went in looking just fine and you came out with these horrid pieces of metal on your face that you had to look through. It was a humbling experience, to say the least, right? And that's the funny thing about pride is we like to point the finger, blame it on somebody else, and think that it's not our issue. I'd just like to say that in the case of King Nebuchadnezzar, when he's on his roof and this transition takes place, when he becomes the beast, the cow, it says he has talons like a bird and the feathers of a bird as well. Very strange sight, right? We need to understand, or at least attempt to understand, that King Nebuchadnezzar's situation is far better when that transition takes place than when he is on the rooftop. That if we believe Jesus' words in the Sermon on the Mount of what blessedness looks like, about what the character of God looks like, and who he blesses, it is far better for King Nebuchadnezzar when he becomes the beast-like animal, crawling around. We tend to look around us. I was having a conversation with a friend this week, 2 friends actually. We tend to be jealous when we look around those and we see them in wealth and power and using them in selfish ways. And we tend to be jealous of them when we should have pity on them, by the way. If we truly believe that Jesus is who he says he is and he's coming back to save us and this is actually going to happen, we should have pity on them. If God would only show us the truth like he showed King Nebuchadnezzar the truth as well, in humbling ourselves, right? He almost shows that King Nebuchadnezzar, he tells him, this is actually who you've been, but this isn't who I created you to be. He gives him over to his own kind of power. Okay, this is from Prophets and Kings 5:20, the book. It says, the once proud monarch had become a humble child of God, the tyrannical, overbearing ruler, a wise and compassionate king. He who had defiled and blasphemed the God of heaven now acknowledged the power of the Most High and earnestly sought to promote fear of Jehovah and the happiness of his subjects. Under the rebuke of him who is King of kings and Lord of lords, Nebuchadnezzar had learned at last the lesson which all rulers need to learn, that true greatness consists in true goodness. After 7 years, everything is actually restored to King Nebuchadnezzar, and this amazing transition takes place. In the end of the chapter, verse 37, he says, now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and glorify and honor the King of heaven. All of his acts are just and true, and he is able to humble the proud. That's pretty amazing. This is one of the most amazing transformations in the entire Bible, by the way, that just took place. From basically ruler of the entire known world to nothing, back up to ruler again. But a complete paradigm shift King Nebuchadnezzar took from his rulership before to his rulership later because he realized reality. He got a clear view that he is a human. and that there is a God in heaven who is able to humble the proud. There's 2 lessons from this story I hope to take away, okay? I hope to take away, and I hope you take away. The first thing is this: God's still on his throne. A few amens there. That's good. And he doesn't let evil reign forever. This will come to an end. While it may not seem good enough for us or quick enough for us, he will do it in his time because he doesn't want any to perish. And we must wait upon him. Sometimes we want to take the battle into our own hands because he's not doing things quick enough, right? Just trust in the Lord and follow him into the fiery furnace or wherever he's going to bring you, because there is going to be some amazing stuff that happens in our lifetime. Amazing. It's God's job to humble them. It's ours to be there for when that happens. But it is ultimately their choice to respond to him or not. Most leaders probably won't respond in this way, but we have a hope that some might. Some people might respond in this way, right? The second thing is this. I know this is difficult for us. Can we put ourselves in King Nebuchadnezzar's position for a moment? That the pride that comes with our life, that comes with the territory that we live in, we're a very proud culture. We stick to our guns no matter what. That we need a paradigm shift. And that sometimes the feeling of the worst things in the world happening to us, and it feels like the weight of the world is crushing us, could possibly be the best thing possibly for us, right? Because it makes us desperate. It makes us realize who is on the throne. That there is a God in heaven who wants to save you and me. And if he can save King Nebuchadnezzar, there's a lot of hope for you and I, by the way. We should never feel hopeless, because just go back and read this story when we're feeling hopeless about our own situation. Sometimes it takes a disaster. Doesn't have to. Doesn't have to. I would much rather acknowledge him and be humbled today than on that day when we meet him face to face. We need a new paradigm. We have to shift to see things through God's lens, and not just our own, not just other people's, but truly connect with him, especially in these days. I think this is a lesson for us. I'm going to have a prayer, and then we have a closing song. We're going to sing "This Is My Father's World." Okay? Let's have a prayer. Lord, thank you that evil doesn't reign forever, that you do, that you're sitting on your throne right now, waiting for your opportunity to take back what has been stolen from you. We look forward to that day, Lord, but until then, I just pray that we are ready with your Spirit in our hearts. We don't have to fight this battle on our own, and if we do, we will lose, Lord. We're not more powerful than the powers of this world. Only you, Father. Only by your Spirit will we see this through. I pray that that is the primary thing in our hearts, that we hold fast to that. And Lord, even if we need an experience like King Nebuchadnezzar, Lord, bring it. That is a scary thing to ask, but it is far worth it to go through that now than to never go through it at all and realize that we've lost you. Thank you so much for our little church. Thank you for your Sabbath. In Jesus' name, amen.